Get ready to uncover how schools manipulate students' thoughts, stifle their potential, and how politicians steal money in the future of America from kids. Welcome to the JB Sill Show.
Wait, what? What a week it's been! Oh my goodness! And it's coming out a bit late because we're totally not too lazy to record when we were supposed to.
Hey, this is on you.
Yeah, it is. You know what? It is on me. But anyway, I think that this has been quite the week in school education wacky news, and that's what I wanted to do. Part of this episode of the Operation Anti-Indoctrination podcast about it instead of covering this on the regular show because we've got so much stuff to talk about. And also, I think we're going to start giving the regular show towards the younger audience, and then this kind of the podcast version towards people who may be parents who would like to know a bit more about the public school system on a more intellectual level, because I can give both. I can give the rant against public school where, we hate the system here, right? And I can also give the facts. So today we're going to get to some of the facts. But first, little education story of the week today. We have a article by a group I've never heard of called American Progress, where they are saying that we should give more funding to public schools in light of all this stimulus spending and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars being wasted and all that good stuff. Public schools just need more money, okay?
Because debt doesn't exist.
Now, I'll spare you the obvious fact that we spend way more than we ever have right now, and the schools have never been worse. But also, the places where we spend the most money, New York City, Chicago, Baltimore, other states like California, have the worst public schools. I mean, objectively, the public schools are terrible, even where the most money is spent. And if you go in states like Arizona, where they don't spend as much money, they still spend an inordinate amount of money, but they don't spend as much, maybe $8,000 per kid per year. It's a different story. You have a whole different story. So this is a deranged, insane article, and I couldn't help but put on Twitter. You know that Billy Madison movie with Adam Sandler. I don't know if you've seen that, but the one where the principal says, "What you just said is one of the most insanely dumb things ever." I couldn't help put that on Twitter because, gosh, that was a nuts article. I forced myself to read most of it, and it was ridiculous. It used some really phony arguments about public schooling and how it's good and how if we just had a little more money, right, Producer Brooke? Just a little more money.
Just a little more. Just spend a little bit more and everything will be good.
Right. It totally won't go to Randy at the AFT, the teachers unions, the bullying militant teachers unions like the NEA and the AFT. It totally won't go to them, and it'll totally go into the classrooms. Just buy some more glue sticks, right? If we buy more glue sticks, everything's good.
Everything's good.
You should just need more, maybe a couple more scissors, right?
Maybe just make those projectors a bit better. Not like we have chalkboards that we can write on and we don't have to calibrate every 5 seconds.
Well, that's true. But here, you see, the thing is, we are spending exponentially more than we ever have before, especially if you go back to the 1800s where the public schools are no better. They're probably worse, to be honest. The schools are worse than ever. I mean, you got things like Common Core now, which are widespread. It's been here for a while. You got outcome-based education. You have a massive surveillance state within the schools. It's just getting worse and worse and worse and worse with conformity and the dependency and the obedience. It gets worse all the time. However, that was the first story, right? Now I'd like to give you a little monologue because I've been doing, quite a bit of research about how we got here, and we've done a lot of this. We've talked about people from starting with Plato, going all the way to Fichte, who designed the Prussian school system, and then you've got Horace Mann, who sent it into America. But what we really don't talk about is how it got to what it is today, in the sense that the low literacy, the bad math, right, the experimental kind of wacky versions of the schooling, and the elitists. We haven't touched on that, and I wanted to touch today on a few people that totally changed everything, and that brought you our modern school system, which if you went to school you probably did not like. Odds are statistically you were one of the 75% of people that didn't like school.
That number seems low.
It does seem low. I think it was probably, well, I don't know actually. It's probably more like 85% to be honest. But
I don't know anyone.
But the official poll was 75.
Back when we were in school, I didn't know anyone who actually liked school.
No one legitimately likes it, and I think the number is probably higher. I don't know if people are willing to admit it all the time. But the thing is, there has to be a reason for that. And I think from from my admittedly limited experience, I think that kids know the system is rotten deep down. They know the system suppresses their creativity and molds them. I think most kids understand that. They just don't consciously think about it and think, okay, this system needs to be redone or overhauled or something like that.
I mean, kids aren't learning anything. Kids know that they're not learning.
We do. We know this is useless. We do. And deep down, I think we know that the system is broken. So how did this happen? Well, as it turns out, it was all intentional. So you have a guy in Germany in the 1800s named Wilhelm Wundt. He was in Leipzig. Leipzig is a city in Germany. He had his own laboratory inside of the University of Leipzig, which I believe still exists today. And he trained all sorts of people. He trained Europeans. He trained Americans. He trained people which would destroy education in favor of some austere version of obedience and conformity. And Wundt said, by the way, that man is completely soulless, there's no nature in us. We are completely made of stimuli. That is it. That's all we are. And if you couldn't measure it, it didn't exist. So if you can't, for instance, the soul, right? If you couldn't measure the soul, it didn't exist. Wundt, he thought, if we can't measure something, it doesn't exist, right? Unless I can measure it, which is really arrogant, but that's what he said. And there's a quote where he says, it seems like a waste of time to discuss the psyche and how people actually work instead of just looking at how to program them into what we want to see. And he trained a lot of people, Wundt. And I would like to go over some of the foremost notable Americans that he trained. First of all, we have a guy named G. Stanley Hall. He had a big beard. But he got back to America in 1883, and he immediately basically gets a job with Johns Hopkins University. He sets up an experimental laboratory at Hopkins, basically mirroring the one in Germany that he studied under. And he basically tries to use experimental psychology to prove that man is soulless and that we need to rigid program them basically with quote-unquote education, which is anything but, of course. And then he becomes president of the American Psychological Association, and he founded the American Journal of Psychology. He becomes president of Clark University, and he teaches a certain John Dewey.
There's some more information about him in, I think, episode 80.
Is there?
Yes.
Okay.
With the animations and stuff, so go watch that.
Oh, yeah, we did talk about that, didn't we? Very impressed that you know it was 80. Anyway, that was the first guy. And so, big impact, right? He comes back. He basically tries to continue his work, trains John Dewey, makes him into a materialist, basically. And then you have, number 2 is a guy named James McKean Cattell. This guy was something. Hardcore eugenicist. Hardcore, very hardcore. He met with Francis Galton in Cambridge, actually. He became friends with Galton, the guy who founded eugenics. And he studied under Wundt in Leipzig again. And he did experiments where he tried to prove that somehow, because people who have been out of school for 50 years and have been reading for all that time, that because they read whole words, we should teach whole words in schools. We should not teach the letters. That was his whole thing. We should not teach letters. We should not teach the alphabet. We should teach the whole word. We're not going to teach THE for the. We're just going to teach the, right? You just got to remember, it's like Chinese, right? It's an ideographic, because English is not a phonetic language. It's an ideographic language, supposedly. That was the claim. And that has obviously caused tremendous damage to our literacy in America. And then he gets back from America. I believe he helps found the American Psychological Association. I think he might have been president at one point. He trains guys like Edward Thorndike. He's friends with John Dewey. Big believer in eugenics again. Big utopian. Doesn't like the imagination. Doesn't like real education. Wants to remake it to fit his worldview where we can program people. Program them. You're going to serve us.
Yeah, you kids are you're gonna be built into our servants.
That is literally what they wanted. And then you have the third guy. So we got the third guy now. We have Charles Judd. That's Judd with 2 D's, by the way. He gets back from Leipzig, And he goes to the University of Chicago. By the way, all of these universities, I mean, they loved these people. The universities, Hopkins, Stanford, Columbia, University of Chicago, they love these people. They wanted them. They wanted them in here because they had the quote-unquote best educations in the world. These are the most educated people there were, so they wanted them. These guys were not dumb, let's be honest. They knew exactly what they were doing. They weren't dumb, and they wanted to transform America through education. And Charles Doe was no exception. He goes to the University of Chicago, becomes friends with, I believe, John Dewey, and basically perpetrates the whole word scheme there, where he tries to dumb people down because that is all he cares about, is dumbing people down so we can have a utopia like the one outlined in 1888 by Edward Bellamy in the book Looking Backward, which is a very powerful book, by the way. It's a book that outlines a utopian American in the year 2000. I've read the book. It made me want to be a utopian. That's how powerful the book was. It made me want to be a utopian. Anyway, I'm getting off topic here. Last guy. This guy, James Earl Russell. He comes back from Germany, and he's very educated. He's the great education, right? In Germany with Wundt at Leipzig. So what does he do? He becomes the dean, the president, essentially, of Columbia Teachers College. Shocking. He becomes the dean of it, and then he corresponds with the Rockefellers, asking for money to pay off the Teachers College's debts and to further a whole word scheme so that kids do not learn the alphabet, do not learn letters, are barely, if at all, literate, and we have a utopia in the end. That was the idea. Now, that is never going to happen. A utopia is impossible. It's been proven time and time again. But they wanted it, and they weren't going to let that stop them. They were very, 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 very idealistic, and they didn't care if they had to dumb down a nation. They didn't care if they had to brainwash kids. They didn't care if they had to basically subjugate people and force them to obey their commands. They didn't care. Why not, right? They were in power anyway. And perhaps most dangerously, they didn't care if it happened in their lifetime. You see, today, the socialists have a little bit of a problem. Right? They want it all now. We want the communist utopia right now. That's what you saw in, for instance, Seattle with Chaz. That's what you're seeing now with a lot of these riots, these violent riots. You're seeing we want it now. We want the socialist dream of utopia now. That is not going to work, probably.
Hopefully.
Right. But this was a lot more sinister because we're just gonna set it all up and it's gonna happen over the next 100 years. We don't care if we die because we're playing part. This was their religion. Utopianism was their religion because they were atheists, so they had to have something, and that was utopianism. So since it was their religion, they didn't care if it happened in their lifetime, and they all died before it got really bad. I think Dewey might have lasted the longest till 52, but even he eventually fizzled out. So that was the most sinister element. I think that was probably the most dangerous, is when you don't care if something happens in your lifetime. That's got to be the most dangerous thing possible. Because you'll do anything. I mean, you'll do anything to set up this system, which is going to march your country, in this case America, to destruction. And now we have whole word, and they had some pseudo-scientific studies which found that supposedly, if you learn the whole words, you're going to be great. You're going to be literate, right? You're going to know how to read the books, and you're going to be happy.
You're going to memorize every word and not forget anything, and not forget.
It lets you escape from the horror of learning the alphabet. It's so boring and it's useless, right? I mean, that's what Horace Mann said. That Horace Mann, guy who founded public schools, said it seems like such a waste of time to focus on the alphabet when we could be talking about just learning the whole words. That way we could have beauty in the child's heart or something like that. That's what he said.
I mean, why learn how to read when you can just not?
They said that they said that not being literate was actually a virtue. They claimed that if you don't know how to read, that's actually a good thing, meaning you are going to be docile. You can be tacitly changed. You'll be able to avoid eye strain, right?
Oh yes. So awful learning phonics.
Well, just reading, honestly. I mean, they were transparently against learning to read, and they said, as Dewey said, Dewey in his 1898 article, The Primary Education Fetish, he said that first of all, it was a waste of time to read, but then also, we don't even need it. I mean, why do you even need to know how to read? And then you had people like the members of members of the Council on Foreign Relations, for instance, asking, do we really have to have everyone literate? I think that was a guy named Anthony O, or something that started with an O. But he said in the 1980s, do we really have to have everyone literate? You know, do we really need that? I mean, why, right?
I mean, when has knowing how to read ever come useful in your life?
Right. Well, they knew they couldn't have the Utopia if you could curl up with a book for a day and read it. They knew they weren't going to have it because utopian revolutions, whether they're communist or fascist, generally bloody revolutions like they were going to have, basically, fail when the people are educated. Right? It has to be either soft power or the people can't be educated.
I mean, right now people aren't very educated about the school system and the national debt.
No, I mean we don't have it. We don't have an education. People are not educated. We don't teach. First of all, we don't teach really, and secondly, kids are never taught to think for themselves. Critical thinking. You know, I was thinking about this yesterday. We never just sit back and think about certain issues where we could probably rationalize our thoughts, but we have to either be a consumerist or we have to just not be involved in it. And it's like with politics where you're just listening to other people and you're never thinking for yourself. That's the problem right now. People will not think for themselves. People will not use critical thinking. They won't use their brains. I mean, why do you need to get rid of someone's brain if you can just turn it off? After school it turns off your brain. It flips a little switch to make you hate learning, to make you uncreative, really, to make it so you don't even want to learn if you could. And go ahead.
Hey JB, you want to learn about like the feudal system in Europe?
Great idea.
Yeah. Oh, you want to learn how to like file your taxes and like issues in the world? Well, we can't teach you that. Can't teach you that.
We don't need that. No, you don't learn any life skills. I mean, it's a sham. The whole thing is a sham. I'm gonna be doing homeschooling this year because I don't want to be in virtual learning. So I'm doing homeschooling. Screw it. I'm done.
Yeah, you want to learn about stuff you like? Well, too bad. We only teach.
You can't learn what you want to learn.
Here.
You can't learn what you want to learn. You can only learn what they tell you to learn. And common sense should really suggest that when somebody doesn't want to learn something, it's not going to be the easiest thing in the world to make them learn it. That's what common sense should tell you, but we don't think about that anymore.
No, we think if we tell students about the feudal system, they will learn it. They will not forget it.
Right, and they'll maybe have a lesson from it. It's absurd. And I was thinking this is a little disconnected, but I was thinking yesterday where we have Legos. Now, Legos 50 years ago when our parents were kids, Legos where you got a big crate of Legos and you worked your mind. You were creative with them. You built whatever you wanted, right? You built a boat, you built a ship, you built whatever. Nowadays, they're in fancy boxes with fancy colors and nice looking instructions. You got those nice looking instructions which tell you how exactly to do it. You're not creative with that anymore. You're just a consumer. That's all we've become today is consumers. We have hyper consumerism, and I think that's a really good example with the Legos where you didn't used to have sets. You had a big box. You bought 1,000 pieces for like $30, right, in today's money, and you did whatever you wanted. You went wild. Now, you don't do that. You have the flashy boxes, which make even the worst sets look amazing. You have the bags and the instructions, and I've built more than my fair share of Legos. I'd say fair share. I've built more than my fair share of Legos. Generally it has been with instructions. So I'm just as guilty in this.
But who doesn't like creating their own sets with Legos without instructions? I mean, it's fun.
But when you
can spend hours on it.
That's true, but when you're so, I don't think people even think to do it most of the time. You just think of let's get the newest Lego set because it tells me exactly what I need to do and it'll look nice at the end. I mean, the Lego today looks beautiful, right? And I think that's a good analogy, or not really an analogy. It's really a good analysis on where we are today. It's a society where even the things that are supposed to be fun are rigid and classified into certain groups, and everything is made for a consumerist culture. Look at sports. Sports didn't always have coaches where you had an organized top-down operation. School didn't have that. No. you used to play outside, just run wild for recess, which we've lost about half of, probably more. And then in the neighborhood, when you were young in the neighborhood, you would play. But nowadays, it's always with a coach or something. It's gotten ridiculous where you don't learn. You're not free to learn anywhere. It's gotten absolutely absurd, where everything is rigid and consumerist. I mean, sports aren't cheap, but you gotta have a coach, right? Because you don't want to learn the other way. You don't want to learn real life skills on the field or something like that. You gotta have a coach. You gotta have equipment. You gotta have everything. You name it.
I mean, kids can still have fun playing actual sports, but it's just like
it hasn't always existed. And you're not learning real life when you play with sports.
I mean, making up your own games is also fun as well.
Right. We've become so unbelievably insulated from the real world that when you're thrown into it, we don't even know what we're doing. That's why you have people with $100,000 in student loan debt, for instance. They don't know how economics work. They don't know how the real world works. And school basically extends your childhood for your whole life. You're childish for your whole life. You're illiterate. You don't know math, right? You don't know how to manage your finances, much less hold the government accountable for theirs. You don't know how to do anything.
Another example of the stifling of creativity would be, like, group project where you make a poster or something, and you have this specific rubric where you have to do exactly this thing and write exactly this way.
I hate those so much.
You put exactly this number of pictures in.
I hate those so much. They're the most. I'm glad you brought that up. Those are the most absurd, insane things. Where, yeah, I mean, you really do. You have to follow exactly what they tell you to. You cannot dither from the instructions, otherwise you get 5 points off. And there goes your grade, right? Your all-important grade, which is going to determine the rest of your life. There it all goes, down the drain.
Hey, you forgot to color this picture, JB.
I'm sorry.
Time to get failed.
I'm very sorry, Producer Brooke. I mean, what would I do without having colored something in? Right. You never get to choose your own education. You're never free to learn the way you want to. You're always someone's pawn, whether you're in sports, right? Whether you're in whether you're in school, whether you're at recess, anything. It's all we have some major problems as a country. I mean, I don't know how we're going to solve this, but we're going to try. I'm not black-pilled, as it were. I don't think anything can ever. I don't think we can save America. I think we can. It's just gonna require a lot of work. All right. Please do subscribe and leave a like on the video. Please also leave a comment down below. That would be much appreciated. You can also follow us on Twitter, and I guess we have an Instagram account now.
If you have any questions, comment, or email, JB will be happy to reply.
jbsocial@gmail.com. So jbsocial show. I don't know why. All right. I think that's gonna be about it. So until next time, I've been your host JB,
And I've been Producer Brooke.
we are signing off.